Hi and welcome to the Geek Legion of Doom. This is a horror movie review and I'll be having a look at The Gate. So The Gate is a 1987, really a kiddie horror movie and stars a very young Stephen Dorff. Now the story is we have Stephen Dorff playing a character called Glenn, who's this sort of young lad. He's got his best friend Terry, who's this boy who has recently lost his mother and is kind of a little bit messed up by it. And one weekend, Glenn's parents decide they're going to go away for the weekend and leave his older sister in charge. And it just so happens that there was actually a kind of large hole that has appeared underneath the site where an old tree used to be in the kind of their back garden, and this hole happens to be the kind of the portal, so to speak, of this sort of demonic underworld. And Terry, his kind of best friend, actually has a kind of heavy metal record which actually gives instructions to kind of release all of these demons, which of course they unwittingly do so, which then terrorise the three children along with a couple of other friends that sort of turn up around the house as well. And so they kind of, the demons want to kind of take over the world as kind of demons do, you know what they're like, and they kind of need human sacrifices and such. And basically it's up to Glenn and his kind of family and friends ultimately to try and find a way to defeat the bad guys. So this is kind of a bit of a forgotten film, I think, of the 80s, because you kind of can compare it to sort of films like kind of the Monster Squad, and I suppose that to me is its nearest comparison, and it's probably a fair comparison. Now, this being a kind of like a kids horror film, it isn't a particularly gory film. There is one moment where he has a vision of his parents coming back, and then their kind of face implodes and it drips into a sort of gooey mess, which is maybe a little bit disturbing for kids back then. But there are a couple of creepy moments as well. The one standout thing I would say here, and this, I repeat, this film is from 1987, but I think the effects are pretty damn decent for the most part. So there's the kind of three main sort of supernatural things that happen within this movie, or creatures I should say. So the main ones, you'll see these little sort of goblin pint-sized demons they call them minions, and the effects are really, really good, I have to say. I mean, I think they use basically sort of disproportionate cameras. They're actually guys in suits, but the way it's done, and they're kind of slightly sped up, they're really, really good. They look absolutely fantastic. Even by today's standards, I think the effects for those creatures look really good. I think they use a stop motion here and there as well with them as well. But for the most part, they look absolutely fantastic. They're both cute and sinister at the same time. And there's a couple of instances where you almost feel sorry for them. They're kind of fighting them off. There's also a kind of a zombie character, which is there's a story of this dead workman that's been buried in the walls, and he shows up as well. And once again, the effects of him are pretty decent. Now there is a large monster that appears at the end, and if they use that as a purely stop motion effect, and I think maybe the effects are a little bit weaker on that one by today's standards. I mean, back then, to be quite honest, you probably wouldn't have noticed, but when you're watching it today, that one does maybe stand out a little bit. If I had to have a complaint about this movie, there are things that are a little bit too convenient, as I've probably mentioned, obviously, in the kind of the plot. There is a lot of conveniences in this movie, and I guess a minor criticism as well. I think maybe the kids don't maybe react quite like you really would. I mean, the first encounters we actually see Glenn sees these sort of shapes sort of moving in the wall, like it's almost like some kind of snake or something within the wall. And it pretty much doesn't mention it, but that's the first thing he actually sees, and it's not really freaked out by it at all. So again, I think this is probably maybe the trend in the 80s where people just glossed over stuff like that, to be quite honest. But to be fair, I think this film is actually a bit of a hidden gem. I don't think it kind of gets the recognition it probably deserves, because to be honest, they are really just kind of relatively minor faults. But it's actually a really fun film, and I think Stephen Dorff gives you kind of tell he was kind of destined to be maybe not massive things, but he was going to do a fairly decent job. He kind of gave a good sort of intense performance, I think, and he's this little lad who's sort of obsessed with rockets. And it's you get invested in the characters. The older sister is kind of they kind of stay away from the kind of the too obnoxious older sister, which is quite nice, and they actually have quite a nice family dynamic, which is sometimes in these sort of 80s films, especially the sort of bitchy older sisters are very kind of stereotypical sort of character that you sort of see in these movies. There are some interesting sort of 80s things here, particularly one of the sister's friends has got a really funny haircut that looks particularly amusing by today's standards. But to be fair, the most part you kind of won't really, it hasn't aged too badly at all. Apart from one other thing I will point out, they actually use some homophobic language, which probably back in the 80s didn't seem quite as bad, but when watching it now, it kind of stands out that you typically wouldn't say things like this in a kind of a film which is really kind of meant for families more than anything else. So you have to watch it to see what I mean about that one. And also there's quite a lot of dead dog in this movie as well, so if you're a bit sensitive in regards to animals, then you know that may be a little bit of a put off for some people. I know some people don't like seeing animals die and all that, so there is a dead dog in this movie. But I really enjoyed it. I think it's a film that if you're a horror fan and you haven't seen it, even though it is an older film, I actually do recommend this one checking out, because I think it's worth a watch. So I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I think it's pretty damn decent, and I think it's a bit of a forgotten classic. Have you seen it? What is your opinion? Leave me a comment. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.